Hello, everyone, and welcome to AP US History for Winners with your teacher, Mr. Johnson. Last time, we talked about the American Revolution and the influence of revolutionary ideals, and today we are talking about the Articles of Confederation, which is our very first form of government in the United States. So, if you are ready, let's begin. The first thing to know, a little bit of context as always, is this idea that a lot of states are creating constitutions. And a constitution, if we don't know, is kind of like the outline or the setup of your government. And a lot of these constitutions for the individual states have property qualifications for voting and citizenship, which means that the only people who could vote or be a citizen is if you owned property. And this means that we're only going to basically allow wealthy people to vote, white men to vote in many of our states. And this is because a lot of people were afraid of the masses. Okay. This is property qualifications for voting is going to stay a thing until about Andrew Jackson. So this is going to be about 40 years of everyone in certain states needing to own property to be able to vote. Another thing to know about the state governments is that the most powerful branch of these state governments is the legislative branch. Now, if you remember your basic civics, the legislative branch is the branch that creates the laws. And this is because they are afraid of an executive. They're afraid of a British monarch. They do not want a king, just like the reason they're having this Revolutionary War at this time. They do not want a king to be in charge of everything and have too much power. And so they have a legislative branch that's elected by voters, white men who own property at the time, but still it's elected by voters. Just a little side story here. Connecticut, if you've ever seen the license plate, we're called the Constitution State. And this is because the idea is that Connecticut was the first state to ever write a constitution in the 1600s. And so that's why we get the name of the Constitution State. All right, so now let's go on to the Articles of Confederation themselves. And again, I want you to think of this as the predecessor to our actual Constitution. It's our America's first form of government is the Articles of Confederation. And whenever you hear this word in AP or ever, anywhere, I want you to think one word, and that's weak. Okay, the Articles of Confederation were very weak, and they were purposely designed this way. Again, and this is really important to know, why would they create a government that doesn't have a lot of power? Well, it's because they're afraid of having a strong central government like Britain. They're afraid of having a king. And so this is created a lot of the times by this political group called the Anti-Federalists. And again, they do not want such a strong central government. And so, how were the Articles of Confederation weak? What were some of the reasons that made them weak? There's no executive branch. So, there's no one person kind of in charge of everything. They have what's called a unicameral legislature. And what that means is that every state just gets one vote, and there's only one group in the legislature, right? Today, we have a bicameral legislature with the Senate and the House of Representatives. So, there's power spread out a little bit more. In the unicameral legislature, every state just gets one vote. And it's really important to know that state legislatures had a lot of power. So individual states have a ton of power, and this is going to create a ton of problems with trade and finances and a bunch of other things. So let's talk about some of those issues now. And we're going to kind of go over a lot of different issues with the Articles of Confederation because, like I said, it was weak. America doesn't use it anymore. So there's obviously a ton of problems with it. Now, it's going to unify all these states in some way. It's going to give us a central government, but that central government, like I said, doesn't have a lot of power, and that's going to cause some problems. Let's talk about those problems. First, we want to think about is international trade. So there's problems with Britain, and there's going to be problems with Spain. With Britain, they're basically going to deny and not agree to a lot of commercial treaties with the United States. And then Spain is going to cut off America's access to the Mississippi River, which was really important for America because the Mississippi River was a big trade highway. People, if you think about it, the Mississippi River goes north and south throughout most of the United States, in the middle there. And that's where a lot of trading would get done. And they'd be able to go all the way down to the port of New Orleans and sell goods. And Spain does not allow America to have access there. And basically, America, because we don't have a strong central government under the Articles of Confederation, doesn't have a way to effectively negotiate with Britain and Spain here. Another issue is finances. So Our Confederation is what we call the federal government or the central government, right? That's what today we would think of like Washington, D.C. But back then, the federal government under the Articles of Confederation could not tax anybody. So that means the central government does not have a lot of revenue. I mean, imagine if there was no taxes from the central government. It'd be tough for them to do a lot of the things that we think of the government as doing. Another issue is that every state could coin its own money. So you could have Connecticut dollars and then Massachusetts dollars, and you'd have to exchange your money when you went to different states. So you can see there's going to be differing values of the money. There's going to be inflation or deflation in other states. It's going to be a mess. These states are going to have difficulties trading with each other. And another thing to know is that there's this idea called debtor's prison that's going on, which is upsetting to a lot of people. That certain states are basically, if you owed money, you could be thrown into jail. And a lot of the people who owe money at this time are American Revolutionary War veterans. And that's going to be very, very obviously upsetting for them. They're going to be very upset by that. So there's a lot of issues with how finances are run under the Articles of Confederation. We're going to continue now talking about more issues. Let's talk about interstate commerce. Now, interstate is when states are trading between each other, like Connecticut is trading with Massachusetts, let's say. And so each state could place tariffs on goods from other states. Now, a tariff is like a tax on imported goods. So Connecticut could say, we're going to tax anything that's coming in from Massachusetts. And the idea is that more people will be more likely to buy Connecticut-made goods, but it makes trade really hard to do. And again, because we have a weak central government, the federal government has no control over this interstate trade. They have no oversight, right? We talked a little bit about other countries with trade, but now let's talk about how our relationships with those other countries. So the Articles of Confederation is a very weak government, and they could not, after this gets put in during and after the Revolutionary War, and the weak government could essentially not force Britain to leave their posts that are in Canada, in North America after the Revolutionary War. They didn't have enough power at the negotiating table to make Britain leave. So America wins this war, and British soldiers are still there. It's very upsetting. And then probably the most important thing to know about the issues under the Articles of Confederation is this last point here, the internal unrest. And this rebellion is really important to know. So we got to lock this one in. Shays Rebellion. So Shays Rebellion is an example of the economic issues that are going down in the 1780s. And this is when veterans of the American Revolutionary War and some farmers in Massachusetts are going to protest about the economic conditions. They're going to protest the idea that farms are getting foreclosed on, that the state taxes are very high in Massachusetts, because people are going to prison if they owe the government money, right? We talk about that, debtor's prison. So they're going to have a huge protest, a huge rebellion. The rebellion's lasting months. And there's no national military to stop it. It's not like Massachusetts can say, hey, central government, send the army in. There is no national government. So Massachusetts has to deal with themselves. They have to ask other states to help. The other states aren't obligated to help. So it's a big issue. And this rebellion lasts for a long, long time. And it's not a great look. And it's not a great thing for the Articles of Confederation, because again, we have such a weakness in the national government that it creates all of these issues that we talked about. So basically, all this stuff makes people want to revise the Articles of Confederation and come up with a new form of government. There is one positive from the Articles of Confederation, one thing that they do, and we do need to mention it this time because that's when it's happening. It's the Northwest Land Ordinance in 1787. And so what this is, it's an idea about how the nation could admit new states. And the rule was, once a population of 60,000 people was reached, then these places could become states. The important things to know about, and that's in the map, that's Northwest Area, those are the areas that are starting to become states, okay? So what's important to know is that it's going to guarantee freedom of religion and trial by jury for these states and for these people. And remember, we might think of these as normal ideas, but this is before the Bill of Rights. So this is important ideas to consider. Also, a lot of the money from selling land in these areas went towards education. They're going to also abolish abolish slavery in every area of the Northwest Territory. So as these people move into these areas, they're not allowed to bring slaves. That's a really big important thing to know and to consider. And then they're going to protect private property in these areas. So what's important about the Northwest Ordinance, again, is basically how there's a lot of context for issues or solutions that we're going to come up with under the Constitution, like freedom of religion, like trial by jury, right? They're trying to figure out the slavery issue already. They're protecting private property. So these are kind of ideas that we're going to think about in the Constitution when we come up with that later, that we're seeing a little bit of context for in the Northwest Land Ordinance. All right, so that is it for our notes on the Articles of Confederation. But as always, it is important to summarize and synthesize what we know. So here are your big idea questions. 1, why were the Articles of Confederation made the way they were, and by what group? 2, who had the power in the Articles of Confederation, and what issues did that lead to? Make sure you're able to describe that one big rebellion issue. It's really important. And 3, describe the Northwest Land Ordinance and its impact. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.